During the Vietnam War, with impaired vision from injuries, he pulled 14 men to safety while he was under enemy fire. With all of that fresh in your mind, listen to what Donald Trump, the Republican nominee for president, said out loud with cameras rolling last night at a fundraiser at his golf club. He was speaking about awarding Miriam Adelson, she's the widow of GOP megadonor Sheldon Adelson, with the nation's highest civilian honor.
I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman.
So again, not a gotcha moment, nothing caught on secret hidden camera. Public statements, a disgusting and shameful display from anyone, but especially someone who wants to be our country's commander-in-chief. It's a flagrant display of disrespect to the men and women who put their lives on the line and commit heroic acts on the battlefield to protect all of us and our way of life. Friend of this show and retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath put it this way, quote, "No, the Medal of Honor is not the equivalent of the medal Trump gave to Rush Limbaugh and Jim Jordan. No, they're not rated equal, not even close. Every single member of the military knows the significance of the Medal of Honor. Every single commander-in-chief in the history of America knows the significance of this medal, except Donald Trump." And as galling as his comments are, at this point, they're not surprising, given the ex-president's long history of disparaging our veterans, publicly and privately. His chief of staff confirmed that he called those who fought for our country suckers and losers. He questioned why someone would serve in the United States military. And he even criticized former Senator John McCain, a prisoner of war, for being captured. This is who Donald Trump really is. And this is where we start the hour with some of our favorite military experts and friends. Medal of Honor recipient and retired Army Colonel Jack Jacobs is here with us, along with retired four-star general and MSNBC military analyst Barry McCaffrey, plus retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel and founder of Democratic Majority Action PAC, the aforementioned Amy McGrath, and the host of the Independent Americans podcast, founder and CEO of the Independent Veterans of America, and founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Paul Rieckhoff is here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your service. I can't believe we have to have this conversation, Colonel Jack, but here we are. I guess what I want to ask you is, do your peers, do the men and women, do veterans, do the men and women of the military understand that Donald Trump not only doesn't respect them, but really does see them as suckers and losers?
Well, many do, but many don't. Despite the fact that Donald Trump is one of the most inept public speakers I've heard, and I'm an old person, so I've been around a great deal. I've heard a great number of public speakers, and you often don't know what it is he's saying, not convinced that he knows what it is he's saying, very digressive and so on, and drifted off into castigating people who have served and sacrificed and can't tell a difference between the Medal of Freedom and the Medal of Honor. We have to remember that this is the man who, as you said, denigrated people who served and sacrificed so that he could enjoy the freedom that he enjoys now. And if it weren't for these people, he wouldn't be in the position where he could enjoy, and all of us wouldn't be in the position where we could enjoy freedom. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is also the guy who managed to avoid serving because of his really deleterious heel spur on his foot. All that notwithstanding, the problem in this regard is that Donald Trump does not understand some of the things which in history have described how we get to a position where we can have freedom. That is through the service and sacrifice of others. I'm reminded of the observation of Hillel, that first century Hebrew scholar who wrote, "If I am only for myself, what am I?" Well, if you are only for yourself, you're probably Donald Trump. Or the observation, almost as poignantly, of John Stuart Mill, who wrote about war. Trump ought to like him because he was something of an individualist and a libertarian, who wrote that a man for whom nothing is more important than his own safety is a miserable creature who is made free and kept free by better men than he. Nicolle?
I love that. Colonel Jack, you might be mad at me for doing this, but I'm going to do two things. I'm going to show our viewers some of the video of when President Nixon awarded you this medal, and I'm going to share a little bit more of the history of your service. Your battalion came under intense heavy machine gun and mortar fire from a Viet Cong battalion. And as we said before, even though you were wounded by mortar fragments, you assumed command of the Allied company, ordered a withdrawal from the exposed position, established a defensive perimeter, and despite your own wounds, profuse bleeding from head wounds, which impaired your vision, with disregard for your own safety, you returned intense fire to evacuate a seriously wounded advisor to the safety of a wooded area where you administered life-saving first aid. You then returned through heavy automatic weapons fire to evacuate the wounded company commander. You made repeated trips across the fire-swept open rice paddies, evacuating wounded and their weapons. Your actions saved the lives of a U.S. advisor and 13 Allied soldiers. We don't read all. Brian Williams probably did, and that's one of the many reasons we miss him. But we don't read all that every time we ask for your advice. But some of what I worry about many things when I worry about Donald Trump, but I worry about the erasure of selflessness. And I worry that what Donald Trump normalizes in his disgust of veterans and of those who lose their lives. I mean, one of the most harrowing things I think I read during his whole presidency was that he stood with General Kelly and didn't understand basically his pride in having a son who sacrificed, who lost his life serving the country. He sees people who put something other than themselves above self-interest as suckers and losers. That's his word. What do we do as a country with the fact that he's been elevated a third time, that an entire political party elevated somebody who sees service that way?
Well, we all have to do a much better job of educating not only this generation, the people who are voting now, but future generations about the importance of democracy and how costly it is to get it and to keep it. Listen, you're looking at somebody who believes in universal service. I think anybody who's lucky enough to live in a free country owes it something in the form of service. And it's only until we have a system in which everybody has to make a contribution to freedom that we will value those things and therefore reject those who think that people who serve and sacrifice are losers. Those of us who've served in combat, General McCaffrey and everybody else who's been in uniform, but particularly those who've served in combat, understand how important it is that we take care of each other. That's how we defeat the enemy and we come home and we preserve freedom. Unless we can educate future generations about the importance of doing that is the route to freedom, we will always be at risk. In this situation, we'll be at risk. We will be at risk from demagogues who try to negate the efforts of those who made this country great and who will keep it great. Education is the only way that we can reach into the future, and we have to do a much better job of educating our future generations, Nicolle.
General McCaffrey, you too may be mad at me at the end of this segment, but I'm going to do this. You received 3 Purple Heart medals for injuries sustained during your service in the Vietnam War, 2 Silver Stars, and 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, the second highest United States Army award for valor. And I guess part of the reason I want to remind all of our viewers of your contributions to our country is because I truly find it terrifying that someone has been elevated by the voters, again, of one of the two parties, who, again, would redefine heroism and patriotism and service to mean that Sheldon Adelson's wife is the same as you and Colonel Jack. I find that offensive to the point of being disoriented by it as an American.
Yeah. By the way, one of the better stories about Jack Jacobs is not only the Medal of Honor recipient piece, but he insisted on going back to Vietnam at the end of the war. The Army likes to keep our few living Medal of Honor recipients alive. When he got back there, his helicopter was shot down. He was darn near killed, rejoining his unit. So it's an interesting sort of record Jack has in public. Look, the Medal of Freedom's a distinguished, glorious award to recognize science, medicine, athletes, artists, musicians. It's a terrific award. And the recipient that Trump was talking about in public is a distinguished Israeli-American physician who has a salient aspect to her bio that she's worth $28 billion, and she funds Trump. So we ought to put that aside. But look, at the end of the day, Mr. Trump and that sort of incoherent babble talk, it was hard to sort out what he was really saying, is someone who has no understanding of public service. It's just foreign to his idea. At one point, he told Howard Stern in a radio interview that he deserved the Medal of Honor for not getting an STD during Vietnam. So there's a comical, dissolute aspect to the man that really is shocking, as you point out.
What does the country owe the men and women who have served in terms of how to cover this and how to understand what it reveals about Donald Trump, General McCaffrey?
Well, look, you start with, 340 million of us in the country. We've got 2.1 million women and men in the active forces, the Guard, and the reserves. And they all got families. Like your prior interview with the candidate for the Senate in Missouri. Mm-hmm. They step forward, volunteers. They are non-felony offenders. They have high school degrees. They're people from solid backgrounds, and they want to serve. And I think that aspect of it is something, as Jack says, we've got to make sure we're passing on to future generations. This country didn't stay intact as a functioning democracy, the wealthiest nation on the face of the earth in history, by accident. It got that way because all sorts of people were willing to step forward and protect it at the risk of their own lives. And they don't do it for money. They do it because they want to make sure their mom and dad honor them, and they're willing to put themselves in harm's way. And by the way, there's other forms of public service. Teaching in inner city school systems, the Peace